Who wants a pot of coffee? I just made coffee. You want a cup of coffee? Sure, there you go. Who wants coffee? Anybody else want coffee? Who wants coffee?
And now it's time for the man with the caffeine, the new tropics for the brain. It's Coffee with Mike. Hang in, hang tight, grab your cup, and let's get this thing started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Java Chat. This is Coffee with Mike, and today I get to sit with one of the co-founders of ProdPerfect, a gentleman over there by the name of Erik Fogg. Erik, thanks for joining us today on Java Chat.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you for having me. Very excited.
Oh yeah, during the pre-show we were already rapping and just like vibing. I swear, it was almost like when Keanu Reeves met with Billy, when they just sat in the back and just started vibing out. We just been going back and forth since we.
Well, what's really funny is so many of the people in my company are really young and like they'll roll their eyes at this, but like one of the things we were bonding over is we were like dunking on Windows Vista and how it's a RAM hog. It's just like,
oh my God, Vista Vista was one of my best nightmares ever.
Yeah.
Oh, the shell was so heavy, and then when they came out with Millennium or whatever it was called, the next one before 7 came out, I was sitting there going
NT.
And then there was NT. Remember, there were two of them.
The whole system. Yeah.
And they both sucked. And I was sitting there, it's like, and Microsoft, I don't care if you want to hear this or not. It did. It sucked, and I'm glad you guys got your shit together. But 10 hasn't gotten that much better. Anyway, you would think a lot of millennials will just sit there and they will still be rolling their eyes at us as they watch this and go, "These old men, they know nothing."
I will say I am officially millennial. I think I'm officially millennial. I was born in '87, which I think like puts me smack dab into it. And
I think because '84 was the cusp of the Z of the X millennial.
Yeah. When I was in college, the like just graduated folks gave us all a hard time for being like these days it's like Republicans that get a rap for calling everyone snowflakes, but it was in the 2000s it was just Gen Xers. They would like call everyone younger than them that like didn't understand their way of thinking about the world, like punk rock and spiky hair and such. Everyone was a snowflake.
Well, what's really funny is that everybody, there's boomers and then there's the Gen Xers, and we got the reputation of they're the ones that just don't care. And it's like, well, if you look at the way things kind of played out, the boomers took all the executive positions and never moved. They died in their chairs if they haven't yet. Nothing against the boomers, you guys are valuable, we love you guys, we needed you around, but it left us to nothing but middle management and grinding and a ton of entrepreneurship, because we got tired of the corporate crap. And then the millennials came along and we looked at them and we said, okay, you guys are just way too soft. You guys worry more about mental health and wellness than we do. I mean, we were told, and although it's a joke, it's quite often referred back to, if you have a problem, okay, cool, give me 10. Take a lap, run it off, walk it off, get outside, go be with nature, go do something, productive for yourself. And self-care was not a big thing for us. I mean, it's the reason that so many of us were kind of repressed and angry.
Well, I do think this is actually possibly a good segue, because it is something that, I'm sort of in charge of talent in my company. And what that does mean is like, I do have a sort of responsibility for, in part, I think, for like the mental, emotional, psychological health of my employees. And
it's important today. I mean, we've even gotten to that point where it's like, okay, so now we have availability of this. So how are you tasked with, because you're talking about helping with mental health while still managing personalities, because you're in charge of talent.
Right.
So how does that work?
Right. Well, one thing I think that's really important is to know that I am not the company therapist. And
I bet that's an easy trap to fall into.
It's a super easy trap to fall into. I actually have to remind myself not to do it. And a big reason I need to not be people's company therapist is I'm also the person telling people that they didn't meet expectations this performance review. right? So like I am often the source of people's mental anxiety. And so I think the thing that we rely on is like enablement and ultimately like radical self-responsibility.
Sure.
And so I think like one of the things that makes ProdPerfect great is it's one of the cool things about starting a startup is you can sort of like set the tone right away if you're conscious about it. That we said like, look, people need to be radically responsible for their success, their hitting their goals. And that doesn't mean you're on your own. And I think that, and also your health, right? And that doesn't mean you're on your own. That doesn't mean I'm going to set you some goals and like, you need to like radically shut the F up and get it done. I mean, like you need to radically raise your hand if it's not working and reach out for help. And so a big part of what we're doing is like investing in, we reinvested in how we spend for benefits and brought some of that on board. But a big thing of what I'm trying to do to sort of empower people is not so much to give them the time because they have the time, not give them the monetary resources because they have the monetary resources, but give them inspiration.
Nice.
And so a big thing that I do is I talk a lot about all of the like mental health stuff that I deal with in front of the company to like normalize it, to help everyone know like, okay, this is okay. This is happy. Everyone's an iceberg, right? It's like Erik's got all this stuff under the surface too. Yeah. He's like a big, like, and I'm trying to like demystify myself as a founder a little bit that like, I'm also kind of like, my brain is also like a box of ferrets, right? That are sometimes like fighting with each other and things go wrong. So I talk about, I talk with my team about therapy that I go to. I talk with them about like I was drinking too much and I decided to stop, and I like talk to them about that journey, stuff like that. And I think that has inspired people just to know like, oh, okay, these are ways that I can take action. I can talk to my peers about it. I can go get help about it, and I'm not alone. And that combined with like really, really good recruiting has a group of people that take responsibility for their own health and well-being.
Okay, so let's back up a second. You're one of the co-founders.
Yes.
How'd you get here? I mean, the passion is obvious. I mean, I'm being sincere. The passion is obvious, but your background, your origins, if you will, per our conversation, I don't know, does it really align with, I mean, this sounds like you kind of took a radical change here into something awesome. Where did this all start? How'd you do this?
You're absolutely right. I do not have, I actually, it's no longer a secret. It used to be, but like one of the once dirty secrets of ProdPerfect, like we're a deep tech, machine learning, dev tools company, right? Like we're engineering stuff for engineers.
Nice.
So it's tough. And I literally failed my intro to computer science class at MIT. So first semester we have passed no record, so it's not on my transcript, but I literally did not score enough to pass.
Wow.
And so I didn't have to, but like at that moment I was like, oh God, maybe I'm not going to be a software engineer. And I was right. I'm not going to be a software engineer. I studied mechanical engineering after that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And out of school, I got into, actually, I want to back up a little bit. Well, no, I'll back up a sec. So out of school, I ended up becoming a operations and management consultant for like factories.
Of course.
These weren't like boardroom meetings. Like I was wearing, Carhartts and helmets and like steel-toed shoes and fixing like milk plants and refineries and stuff like that. Like, and really loved it. I think I was really good at it. So real quick leading up to that, I grew up on a small farm in Pennsylvania. Nobody in my family got into college. Like it's a very American dreamy kind of story.
Sure.
And
MIT? Hell yeah, that's a dreamy. Are you kidding?
And I think the really key thing for me, and this like really inspires how I even think about like politics and policy. The big thing for me, because like, no, I didn't go to an exceptionally great school, right? It was just like a rando, rural public school. But the X factor for me was my mom, who like at times bit of a tiger mom, right? When I was 14, was driving me nuts, but she really, really cared about my education, and in particular cared about pushing me, not letting me be comfortable, finding ways for me to be challenged because school wasn't doing it enough. And that, I think, like made me curious enough that this whole series of events got me into MIT, got me to that degree, and got me into this consulting firm. I was running around fixing factories, and it was there that I actually got passionate about leading my own team. And in particular, that firm, Stroud, was more than anywhere else I've seen since, including my own company, big on personal and professional development, and like being radically honest with feedback, being radically present in these conversations with your manager, so you can really dig up stuff and have very vulnerable conversations.
Yep.
And I wanted to carry that forward here. Now, the real quick bounce around of how I got from there to here is I ended up leaving because I knew I wanted to start my own company and lead my own team. I got invited to start a robotics company from another MIT grad. It did not go well, but I learned some cool stuff there. Sorry, by it did not go well, we quickly learned it was a bad idea after only raising like 50 grand or something. So like, that's a win, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we closed up shop, but that's where I met Dan, who's my CEO, because I hired him as my software engineer. He and I became best friends. He and I have been talking about like how to fix the world for a long time. And he pitched me on ProdPerfect by saying, look, the software world, like software engineers, they get joy and energy out of building great products. And they get weighed down and ground down and burnt out by all of the BS around that. So there's all sorts of things like, some of it's meetings, some of it is, some of it's this, that, and the other, and some of it is QA. And I think I know how to fix the QA problem. And it took him a long time to actually convince me on this, because I didn't know anything about software. So I just didn't, I couldn't develop for myself the thesis that this was going to be a good idea. But he ended up selling me on it. He said, like, I want you to be the business half co-founder, right?
Sure.
Be the Steve Ballmer to my Bill Gates.
Nice.
And I was like, all right, great. I'm in. Let's go.
That's awesome. So you guys ended up starting ProdPerfect, which is a development company for developers. Did I say that right?
More or less. We engineer tools for engineers. And I only want to like emphasize that in particular because like it requires our product, which I know we'll talk about it more later, but it's an autonomous testing tool for our customers' web applications. So basically, like, rather than get your engineers to do a bunch of QA, you just plug in ProdPerfect, to use a bunch of machine learning magic that, again, we can discuss later if we have time, to autonomously test your application to make sure you didn't break anything. And so it's like deeply integrated into CI, deeply integrated into like deployment processes, and like highly dependent on how our customers set up their like test data management process and all sorts of other stuff. So this is all stuff that like I had to learn really quick what it meant, because like I didn't know anything. That's
a monumental task when you have to step into a new realm. What's really cool is you eventually took the mantle and said, screw it, let's see what happens, and went after it. And now it's apparently succeeding, which is good. That's good news. I'm still reeling on the fact that, because I have friends that are from MIT too, and every one of them's amazing. One's a walking encyclopedia, and he's well into his, I think, late 60s now. And he still to this day absorbs information instantaneously. You tell him something, he's like, oh, did you know? And then I'm sitting here going, where do you store all this, dude? Because like, do you have a hard drive on you somewhere?
Exactly. Because he read that once when he was 31.
Yeah. And already knows the theory behind it. I mean, he probably knew about fiber optics before they had glass being made. I'm glad you caught that. But so you've come into co-founding with your partner. He's obviously the programming side of things. You said you're the business side of things.
He's the brains of the outfit. Yeah.
He's the brains of the, okay, cool. When you look at where you guys started to where you guys are right now and where you're headed, what do you think the trajectory is of ProdPerfect as it relates to your industry and as it relates to how it's going to affect the rest of the world? Because you did mention before you did want to do good. So how does that work?
Yeah, so I'll be really transparent that we actually, so in our first we sold our first deal like 6 months in, long before there was a product, right? But we were like very transparent about the fact that like, hey, we're gonna gather some data from your application and use some data science to inform like Mike over here, right? Not actually Mike, but inform Mike over here how to write tests for your application. We're gonna like experiment on this. And they're like, great, and they paid us like a couple $1,000 a month for it because they were like, they knew Dan and they trusted him and knew Dan was a great engineer. And like, so we get our first customer in like mid 2018. And after that, it looked like just hardcore, endless exponential growth.
Wow.
And oh yeah, it was, we were totally going to be the next, I don't even know what, but like we were like IPO in 3 or 4 years at billions of dollars kind of thing. And we had some very excited VCs. And the thing I think that makes us special today is like, not that we did that. Some of it is just like, I had to, like, I think like my consulting experience helped me, because like back in consulting, like I just show up to an oil refinery and like within a couple weeks become the expert on oil refining. And so like I was able to try to like, as an outsider, like get in the head of the buyer and not in like a tricky way, but in a like, what do they really need kind of way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so like sales was going really well. And then just when the pandemic happened, some massive tech debt essentially blew up our product.
Wow.
And everything looked like it was the perfect storm. Everything looked like it was going to crash down all at once. And we had to, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And one I still feel bad about is we were a team of 40. We laid off people until we were down to 15.
A lot.
Core skeleton crew carrying this forward. Of those 15, 14 of them are still with us. And because they just like hunkered down and like this is where like some of that like cohesion and like emotional resiliency stuff that we'd been working on really paid off. Because we had to reform everything. We had to reform the product. We had to reform how we sold it because we were demanding too much of the product, because like people who know a lot about testing know that there's so much variability between how you set up your test infrastructure. We're like, okay, what kind of test infrastructure can we sell to right now? So long story short is we went through a period of what appears to be contraction, right? If you just look at like the revenue numbers, we contracted from early 2020 to really the end of 2020. And there was legitimate doubt by our investors about whether we could carry the ship forward. And we laid out a plan and asked for time. And I think like our saving grace at that point was that the state of the thing, it would be like replacing surgeons in the middle of surgery or something. Ooh. Like you just wouldn't be able to do it. And so like that's probably the thing that kept us around, was that even if this is an idiot surgeon, like nobody else would be able to pick this up and run with it. So long story short is like, it was, I think, through our resiliency and our essentially our talent, and like a lot of stoicism by Dan, our CEO. So I'm the emotional founder. He's the stoic founder. And
he's an engineer. What do you want?
Yeah, exactly. And so we got back on the exponential growth path in like Q2 2021. And we are intentionally growing a little bit more slowly now. Because we just don't want to flame out. But we are, so like, all exponents have a correlate on them. So the correlate on this exponent is a little smaller. But yeah, we're back on the exponential growth curve. So what that means for us is like, we're in the couple millions, between 1 and 10 in ARR. We need to go get our Series B, build out a much bigger like AI based team. And so we anticipate right now like we can really put on the gas, because we'll achieve a level of scalability that we don't have yet, especially like for the sales team, just be able to go sell to anyone.
Sure.
In late 2022. And then we just go take over the whole world. The one thing about like through all of this, I think the thing that like kept everyone, including the investors, on board was that our customers keep saying this feels like magic. It shouldn't work. It doesn't make sense that it works. The technology shouldn't be ready yet. Nobody should be able to do this. So we get a lot of skepticism in sales, and I have to teach people about how to deal with that. But then like once people get their hands on it, they're like, this is a miracle. Like I used to have to hire a QA team that was like 20% of my entire team, and now I don't. And now it just works.
Most people don't realize this is exactly how far along AI's come, and the ability to engineer. I mean, after reading the book Deep Neural Networks, which, by the way, anybody can find online, it's free.
Yeah.
Once you understand the thinking behind deep neural networks and what it can do, and you see some of the programming behind it, any engineer would look at that and go, wait, that's it?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, exactly. So I was gonna say I can do that. They can do that. I can't do that. But they can do that.
I can't either. But the way that book is actually written, it's written for both programmers and executives. So from an executive standpoint, as a consultant, I looked at it and I was like, oh no, this isn't half of what they've tried to make it out to be, which is this huge, ether kind of thing. And it's like, no, this ain't ether. This is just redesigning a brain, just using a machine.
Yeah. And I think that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Yeah.
Well, I think that like sense of mystification, right, is something that I run into a lot in my role as like, I'm also head of sales, that I'm often kind of disappointed about. And you and I riffed about this earlier, that like, I think engineers are a little bit prone to, and so does Dan, a little bit prone to like cargo cult thinking and other like irrational stuff, when they should, when you'd expect that they're always the ones just saying like, how do I understand this? How do I push the bounds of this? But I do know sometimes I talk to execs, really smart folks who, like VPs engineering and such, and will explain how it works. And they go, well, is it AI? I'll be like, I don't know, man, you tell me. I just explain how it works. Right. And like, what does it matter if you label it AI or not?
Yeah.
Right. Like, we're using machine learning here, and here to improve the machine's ability to create algorithms. Like, what do you want? And I think what happened is like a lot of sales teams who sell AI type stuff, they figured out that they can create this sense of mystery about it, that they can like hand wave and be like, oh, the AI does this and the AI does that. Well, AIs don't do anything, but and I think like we're so used to digesting AI like that yeah, I think even great engineers, smart folks, until there's something about the word AI that makes them feel like it's too big for them. And it's not. It's just software.
It's the software. What's really interesting, and this is probably oversimplifying AI, it's just another brain that takes information in and puts information back out. It's still a yes/no answer. Exactly. And a process of going through 1,000 yes nos, just like our brains do. We have programs that are in our head. We have things that we think about when we see a certain situation. Somebody sees a dog and they get, euphoric. Somebody sees a dog and they become anxietous. Two different situations. Why? Programs.
Reinforcement learning.
Yeah. Reinforcement learning. Yeah. Somebody sees a dog and thinks Pavlov. Different story. But in essence, when you can take the mystery and pull it off of the cloud, it's like, in certain ways, and I remember even hearing this in certain religions, they're trying to bring the hierarchy of a being down to man's level because of the age of information. They no longer think that he's really that far up. And it's like, well, hold on a second. He's not AI. He's something else. He's something that deals with chaotic math that we still don't understand yet. I mean, if you look at our universe, it's full of chaos. You can't tell me there's not something that's got some laws running out there. Whether you call it by a name or you call it by the universe, I don't care what you call it. We have AI, which is a forgive garbage in, garbage out process. It's just a matter of it knows what to look for. It knows how to look for it. And then it spits out the information that you need. I mean, you have a QA process that's automated. Nobody has to sit there and watch it anymore. What's the big fear of being able to have a tool that can accurately help you with that? Again, when sales guys, like you said, when sales guys go out, they try to create the mystery and woo and here, let's wave a wand, and which is one of the old closes. If I had a wand or you had a magic wand and you could do, well, this does that. Oh, yeah. Now you just told me you have a magic wand. What is this, Harry Potter? Right, it's not as, it no longer becomes easy to sell.
Right.
So there's been a time for this, long time coming, as far as what AI can do. We use it in our marketing, literally just to be able to get people ranked better on Google. SEO used to be a completely manual process. not anymore.
It shouldn't be. Yeah.
No, and you know what? It's not that we're trying to keep people from having work. It's we're trying to make their work easier and give them different responsibilities. Give them a chance to expand their own horizons and be more creative, which I'm sure that's something that you do.
I'll always be a technology optimist for that reason. I think one of the things we often forget, speaking of which, Mike is drinking from his Hogwarts mug right now, but
I'm a Potterhead, sorry.
But people have always been afraid of technology stealing jobs, and disruption is something that, like, at a policy level, we have to think about, right? If there is a large disruption in the labor force, that's always something that's like, okay, we need to deal. But like at the end of the day, it was up until the Industrial Revolution, about 95 to 98% of all human labor was employed in creating and distributing food.
Yep.
And now it's the opposite. Now we flip it. It's 95 to 98% is not employed in that. And and I think one of the things that we need to think about for like the age of AI that's coming is that, at least right now, like there's this really good CGP Grey video where he's like, AI is actually going to take everyone's jobs, at which point we also have a policy problem of like, okay, how do we just like take all the productivity of AI and redistribute it in a good, like, it'll be a good thing if it happens, but for the foreseeable future, it's ultimately that like AI takes the way I like to frame it to people is that, like, if I give you a hammer and a chisel and tell you to go break rocks, right, like all day, you're gonna hate me for it, unless what I'm saying is like, no, break that rock into like the most beautiful sculpture you can imagine. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, that sounds great, right? It's still hammering and chiseling rocks all day, but the difference is in your mind of how engaged your mind is. And the thing that AI is going after next is all the stuff that's like not engaging, right? All the stuff that is not creative and promoting to human flourishing. And to your point, it's like taking in data, using a bunch of experience to like make some decisions with that data, and then popping out a decision. And it could do that at scale and all that stuff, and like fill in spreadsheets for us. Anyway, I'm
that's
very excited for the future.
That's the difference between hard labor and hard work.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I mean, since you brought in the rock thing, I mean, if you think about it, hard labor is just being on a chain gang,
right? Breaking
rocks. Hard work is creating something that's beautiful.
Exactly.
And something you hopefully are inspired to go do.
Exactly. And
awesome.
And yeah, coming out of it dusty and sweaty, like,
and knowing you got something done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, nobody minds working hard.
Nope.
And everyone will work hard if they believe. Everyone wants to work hard. In fact, like, everyone wants something worthy of their time, right? And so, like, and that is something, I don't know, like, this is a thing of mine, is that I think like leaders, especially tech leaders, talent leaders, can do a better job helping people align themselves to the work. I don't mean like turn everything into sculpting. I mean that, especially in tech, everyone is building cool stuff. If anyone isn't inspired by their work, we just haven't pitched it right, because everyone is working on this incredibly like interesting, forward-thinking, changing the human landscape, changing human endeavor stuff. And I do think putting in the work to help people understand how their goals and their interests and the eudaimonia that they want from life is aligned with this work that we make available, and sometimes change the way that work is done, pays massive dividends for the mustache waxing, monocle wearing capitalist, and it's just more enjoyable to go into work every day.
Absolutely. It's interesting too that some people forget. They sometimes think that their work isn't as relevant, and yet, going back to the sculpture, if you're not doing the whole body, but you're responsible for one digit on a hand, and you do enough work that somebody can actually feel the texture on that finger, you've done way more than you think. And I think sometimes people forget that, because we get emotionally involved in, why am I doing this? What's the purpose? Is it really doing anything for me? If they can separate themselves from the process and really take a look at what it is that they're actually working on, they might find a little more purpose before anxiety, if that makes sense.
I'm going to real quick share with you like the most radical story of this that I
do that
It was from my milk. It was when I was consulting for milk factories. They would take in raw milk from farms and turn them into bottled milk of various kinds. Surprisingly complex operation. And I remember there's this guy, I forget his name, unfortunately, but this is in Western Pennsylvania. Old guy, hands were all gnarled and curled up like this from years. Like he couldn't even open his fingers fully because back in the day before automation, he had to pick up crates of milk by hand. So his fingers were all effed up. Luckily we have machines to do that now. But so because his hands were all messed up and he's like very senior and like very beloved and very loyal to the company. Sure. They were like, whatever, guy was in his 70s, but they're like, we're going to make sure you have a job. And so he oversaw the blow mold machine. The blow mold machine takes in plastic, blows out bottles. You don't have to do much other than watch it and make sure that it doesn't F up. And if it F's up, hit the stop button, right? And like adjust some knobs to change like the heating parameters and stuff like that. Anyway, he sees me, this like 22-year-old young buck, right, running around, and he decides he wants to dispense some wisdom. And he says, you know, he says he loves his job. I was like, you know, I didn't go really, but my brain went really, like, and I think he saw a little of that in my eyes, and he told me he has his wife and their granddaughter were like out shopping at the grocery store, and like grandma was like teaching granddaughter like, you know, like here's how food acquisition works in the 21st century, and like here's how to be a quartermaster for your home. And they pass by the milk, and grandma says, you know, grandpa makes that. And granddaughter like was like, really? And like, you know, eyes pop open, she looks up and she goes, yeah, grandpa makes that. Grandpa works hard every day so that you and I can come here, and whenever we need milk, it's right here for us. All we have to do is grab it. And she's like, that's amazing. And he is crying as he's telling me this story, because like he understands. That's I think the point you and I are making about like building that alignment between the work and our experience of it, because he understands the impact that he has on tables all over Western Pennsylvania. Right?
Oh yeah.
And so much of what, and that's why I write this whole post about it on our blog. That's why so much of how our relationship with work is in our own minds. It has less to do with the material conditions of the work, way more to do with how we think about it.
I'm gonna want that blog link so we can put that in the comments down below, because it's relevant. Cool. We're gonna take a short 30-second break. When we come back, we're gonna talk a little bit more about where all this passion comes from, what inspires and what motivates Erik, and maybe some other stories that are cool, because that was a really cool story, dude.
Thanks.
But yeah, we'll be back in 30 seconds, and we'll talk more. We'll keep this rolling. I do that so I know where it's at, where to put the brakes. That is a cool fucking story. Seriously. And I would have probably said the same thing in my own mind. It'd been like, I really love my job. Making bottles? What the fuck? Okay, cool.
It's loud and hot and stinky.
Yeah. Well, plastic.
Yeah.
Plastic don't smell good when you heat it. Nope. I don't care where you're at. Yeah, I've actually played around with that one. Not in a milk farm processing plant, but with other plastics. Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Just let me clear my head a second. I had a couple of thoughts run past, and I have to remember a couple of things. How's the flow? Good?
Oh, loving it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Having an absolute ball.
Good. Okay, cool. Let's keep rolling then. 3 shots. Ready?
Ready.
Back in 3, 2. And we're back here. Java Chat, Coffee with Mike, sitting here with Erik Fogg, one of the co-founders of, and my mind goes freaking blank. That's the best company's name.
ProdPerfect.
ProdPerfect. I knew perfect was in there. I couldn't remember the first part. ProdPerfect.
You know, so if our first investors were like, you need to change your name, and we were just so attached to it, we're like, absolutely not. But our customers have it. They're like, production prod. You know, they stumble over it. Someday it will change, I'm sure. But Not yet.
It's a repetitious thing for branding. That's all it is, bro. And honestly, ProdPerfect, now that I've said it a couple times, I will probably also forget it because I'm old, but that's different. No, ProdPerfect's not. It's actually, it's pretty interesting. The name itself comes from where?
It's the perfect, the idea is just, it's the perfect way to ship to prod. Or it's like shipping to prod perfectly, and prod being, of course, the production server. So it's really just about that. It's like, oh, okay, you want your deployment to be perfect, call ProdPerfect.
Got it.
Yeah,
that makes absolute freaking sense. By the way, if you're in tech and you're an engineer and you're looking for something to check your QA, we'll be talking more about this later. But
oh, cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to make sure people understand what it is you guys do. You got into this obviously by being convinced by your partner. Once you got in, what were some of the aha moments you had as you brought on new talent? What were some of the things that got you like, ooh, we need to take care of that?
Oh man. So many. I think one of them, especially now that, since you mentioned talent, a few things come to mind. One of them is that I think every first-time founder learns this the hard way. And so if you're going to be a first-time founder, this is just like a warning. This is going to happen to you, is that your first employees that you get on, they have a certain like tenacity and scrappiness that you really need early on. And you get very attached to them because like they came in with super high risk and super, and there wasn't a lot of money and stuff like that. And the hardest thing is that for them and you, for like you, the founders, and for them, the early employees, everyone, essentially like everyone that was there before the seed round, like before you raise a couple $1 million, for them to like be a major part of the future, everyone needs to change. Everyone needs to radically change at least the way that they do work, or like the parts of themselves or the strengths they're leaning on in the organization. And especially like for that scary word, scaling. I think this is very true in engineering. Like we had like a very scrappy, just like find a way to get it done, built this like monstrosity of a back end that we had to like redo in a much more disciplined way. And so like the reason I'm bringing this up, there are a couple stories I actually don't want to share, but the outcome of it was that we had to have some tough conversations with ourselves and with each other about like, we need to let go of these habits that had been successful for us in the past and do something new. And there were people who got it that need to be reminded sometimes. There were people who got it who led the way, and there were people who were very resistant to it. And the people who were very resistant to it do not work at the company anymore.
Sure.
And they weren't fired. It ended up like just being so much grind that actually everyone decided like, like I don't want to work with Dan anymore, kind of thing, because Dan's telling me what to do, and that's not what I signed up for. And it was because that change didn't occur, that pivot didn't occur. And I hate the word pivot, but I think one thing that I wish we had done better, one thing I wish we knew back then was letting everyone know who's part of the early team. Like, look, we're in the Wild West now, right? Which means like running around with guns and like, and being heroes, but soon you're gonna have to be building towns.
Yeah, exactly.
Excuse me. And so you need to be ready to just change on a dime what you're doing and what you focus on and what strengths you rely on. And I wish we'd warned people that ahead of time. That was a big thing for us and of course you only know this you can only learn this at early stage startups because no other company changes that fast.
Right. Yeah. And it's a progressive thing.
It doesn't happen once.
If people are aware of it, as you said, and yes, we've all same. If people are aware of it, mentally they're easier going when the change hits.
Yeah.
And they'll hit the resistance and they'll go, what the hell's going on? Oh, this is what Erik was talking about. This is that spot. This is that point. These are times, and they come in companies all the time, whether established or startup, it doesn't matter. I mean, even the big corporations hit it every once in a while. And unfortunately for them, it takes them a lot longer to Pivot. Yes, I don't exactly enjoy that word either. It's kind of cliche-ish these days. But because it's like turning the Titanic in a tub.
Right.
When you do get to that point of, okay, we're sitting on a sandbank, we're not going anywhere. We gotta back up and head a different direction.
Yep.
When people are mentally prepared for it, it's easier for them to process,
right,
and make the adjustments.
Yeah, and what that reminded me of was I felt like early on, Dan and I acted like our VCs knew more than we did, or we believed implicitly that our VCs knew more than we did. They've helped a lot of companies scale to IPO and such. They know what they're doing, and it's not to say that they're not brilliant, because actually I hear a lot of people gripe about their VCs, and our VCs have been great. So as far as in my N=1 experience of startups here, I'm very happy so far, but or not quite N=1, but N=1 at this scale. But what we had to figure out the hard way was that our VCs are like, the job of the venture capitalist is very different from the job of the founder, and the skills that they need to be good at are very different. And one thing they can do is they can give advice about patterns. Their job is to find patterns and identify patterns, and identify like where those patterns are changing or where they should be breaking. But they have this sense that like, oh, okay, basically like, here's how everyone else that I've seen be successful does it. And like, that is the basis of their advice. And what I think was interesting about me and Dan was we were so far out of, like, I know a lot of people who want to be founders and they spend a lot of time studying this stuff. We were not in that mode. We were before we founded this company, we were just like focused on whatever we were focused on. Not spending time reading about how Airbnb started any of that. And what that means is that we were like surprisingly ignorant about a lot of these moments through your growth. And what it meant was we did stuff that like shattered a bunch of rules. And our VCs would be like, why are you doing this? I was like, I don't know. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. They're like, don't you know you never do that? I was like, why would I? I haven't run a company before. And basically what happened is like, we did all this stuff that was actually really, it was like very goofy and weird. And I'll share a couple of examples. And it's because we didn't know we didn't know we weren't allowed to, or we didn't know we were not allowed to do this. So we just did it and it worked. So a good example is internally, everyone's total compensation package is transparent. Everyone knows what everyone makes. And
that's highly unusual.
Right. And I knew it wasn't normal, but like, I figured, because I hadn't been in my previous companies, but I was like, this makes sense, and I was thinking about like recruiting and equity and such. And like, one of the problems that people have is like, are people of color getting paid the same as, people who are white? And I was like, okay, let's just show what everyone's getting paid. Right. That way, nobody has to worry about it. Right. You don't have to. And here's the database that we got your salary from. So you don't have to worry about whether I'm lowballing you. Right. You don't have to worry about like, run around and like trying to negotiate with me, but like, this is the database, right? Use option impact. This is the database. This is what you make. You're in this role, right? It's that simple. We do this with offers now too. We just show people where we got the number from. They're like, look, I'm not lowballing you. I just picked it right out of here. It's right here. And so it's been great. It's been awesome because like people don't try to power negotiate, with me about offers because they go like, well, this is what the market says the job's worth. And it's also great. And that sounds evil, except that I'm not lowballing people, right? I'm giving them what the market says they're worth. And it means that like, we don't have that angst internally. And when our VCs first found out about this, they freaked out.
Yeah, sure.
Because they're like, oh my, because they can't even imagine what the impact on that could be. And I think you have to have the right kind of culture for it.
That's a part of it. That's definitely a part of it.
Yeah. But it's been great for us so far. So they're like, that's just like one of the ways that we just like keep finding that we've been breaking the rules this whole time, in ways that I now really enjoy.
I think as scale occurs, the culture will have to adjust. Because even though you're being fair, you're always going to have the detractors that will seep into the culture. This is just the rule of averages. Yeah. So their awareness of it is more to the aversion of that, wanting to have that kind of toxicity enter the culture, which is why they say you never do that. Right. But you've created a culture of transparency where there's nothing toxic in it because everybody's like, well, I know what you make. I don't care. I'm making okay. They showed us. They've been honest. What am I worried about?
Right.
Yeah. Most companies, that's in fact 99, because I'm sure there's a couple of other wonderful unicorns like yours. 99 or 98% of the companies out there won't. In fact, they tell you you don't share what your compensation package is with anybody else.
Right.
Me personally, I would care less. You want to know how much I make? Cool. You want to know why I make it? Here's my skill sets. This is what I bring to the company.
Right.
Can you do what I do? Okay. Well, I respect you, what you do. And I can't do what you do. So please keep doing what you do, because if you don't, I can't.
Yeah.
It's a machine.
It's one of the reasons I like using that market data. I mean, I use it because I want to pay people fairly, but the reason I like using that market data and make it very clear that we base on that is that it also depersonalizes salary, where we go like, look, this has nothing to do with like what I think your value and badassery as a human is. This is like primarily driven by supply and demand of certain skill sets, right? And this skill set that this guy over here has, who's the highest paid person in the company, and by the way, the top 8 highest people paid in the company don't have a C in their title.
Yeah.
Right. Because like turns out wannabe founders are a dime a dozen. Right. And, but like certain engineers are extraordinarily rare. So the market, there's low supply, high demand. Right. We know how that works. And so it means that people like don't take it personally. And people see that like, hopefully there will come a day where I am the highest paid person in the company, but it's a long way away.
Or one of them at least.
Or one of them. Yeah. But it's probably a long way away. So says the market. And so I think this helps people understand, like it helps this team of people who are part of an exceptional culture process and understand, okay, here's why. And like armed with, because we don't just release it. Like we talked about it too. And I think that's one of the things we had to learn regarding transparency is you can't just bomb information out there that nobody's ever seen before and expect them just to figure it out. You have to say, okay, hey, I'm going to release everyone's salaries and I'm going to do it live with you guys in a meeting and talk you through it.
It's basically giving people intellectual perspective.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. When you offering perspective is one thing when it's only you. Offering intellectual perspective is when everybody can see it.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh boy, you bring out a good one that really needs to change in corporate culture, but we're not going to see that for a while because again, turning the Titanic in the tub it takes a long time. But it would probably, I need to share this particular podcast with a couple of my friends who are in HR.
I'm trying to think of the best analogy for it. There are like great analogies in history where countries or armies or something held on to something held on to like a policy or something whose efficacy was degrading for them over time because making the switch was very risky and painful. Making the switch to the thing that was like moving in the right direction is very risky or painful. I think like for example, I mean, during the like age of revolution in the 1800s, right, you had countries hanging on to despotism, right, and not embracing liberalism because they're like, oh my God, what happens if we like let people vote, right? Like this is scary. And and it is scary, right? Like we kind of laugh about it now, but it is scary, right? Like this person never went to school. You let them decide who runs the country? Seriously? And so it is a little frightening. But like hanging on to despotism as, like it was hanging on to a sinking ship, and a lot of countries suffered deeply for it because making that jump was very scary. And I think the thing I want to acknowledge is that it's one of the reasons startups make sense, because otherwise economically they seem crazy, right? You have no resources and you're going to go up against this company. They could just crank out your product next week. It's like, but they won't. And I know they won't because they're calcified in all these ways. And there's just too much momentum. And so I think like similarly with culture, it's one of the things we don't think about as much. Certainly one of the things VCs don't ask about is they ask about how's your product different and how are you going to build that and build the moat, but like, how is your company different and how are you going to run it in a way that makes it consistently nimble and consistently access top talent? They just kind of abstract that like, oh, there's a talent war. It's like, wait a minute, but if we win it, will win everything, right? Like strategy is great, but like we need people who can do this. So you're not asking me my plans to win the talent war before you give me money? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Because I have the opportunity to do anything I want. You should know what my plans are. Anyway, I'm going off in a bit of a tangent here, but like definitely a big part of our fundraising over the last couple of years has me been going like, wait a minute, aren't you curious how we're going to get all these cool machine learning people in the most competitive labor market that has ever existed in the history of man?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, that is a good idea. I'm like, yes, like we should be talking about this.
Yeah. When you, especially because of the industry that you're in, where it's highly, highly specialized.
Yeah.
You cannot not have a plan.
Right.
Their personalities are special as well.
Yeah.
And if you're not akin to what that can mean, especially when you have to put them into teams, then manage that, not them, but the team, which is interesting. I still hear people, how do you manage them? It's like, I don't manage them. I manage it. I think sometimes we get so far into it. How do you manage them? Well, now you're talking about managing the human. They can manage themselves.
Yeah.
They're big people. And if they can't, they'll move themselves out.
Yeah.
I mean, the honest truth is that's some of the old thinking. I've always, I don't talk much about it, but since the ideology was brought up, the difference between conservatism and liberalism, and how right now there's such a friction between the two. And I says, actually, they need each other and they know it. The real ones, conservatives and liberals, do realize, the real ones know, I cannot move forward without that thinking. And the other ones know, like, I cannot continue moving forward without some restraint. Because if I do, I'll be running off into a wild blue yonder that could cause some serious problems. True ones will understand that, and they will have conversations, and they'll have dissent, and they'll have debates, and they'll come to a conclusion where it can move forward. Right now, obviously, we're not seeing that in our country. There's a lot of, my biggest problem is there's a lack of compassion. There's a lack of empathy. That's just my thought.
I'm going to declare I'm not even going to get started. I actually release a podcast twice a month on partisanship in the United States called Reconsider. That's my like side hobby. I talk about this stuff all day. We could totally hijack this show, but we won't.
We could talk about that on another show if you want. But the idea too, again, that goes back into when you're looking at managing talent, finding, managing, and supporting and inspiring. You cannot manage the person, you must manage the team, and the team must be allowed also to have equity in that management. Not as you guys, what is it? The inmates are running the asylum, not that, but in a manner where, as a manager or as a project manager or director or whatever, that you're able to look from above and say, what if we went this way? And then let them talk amongst each other, come back and go, here's what we thought about that. This is what we think would work. All right, try something.
I'm really glad you said the word inspire, because sometimes people will ask me like how I motivate people. I go like, oh God, I don't. Right. Like motivation is like intrinsic motivation is one of the things that we recruit for. And if you don't have it, it's not going to work out.
Yeah.
And the three things we look for, by the way, are ethics, motivation, and coachability. And and you need to inspire motivated people who are fundamentally motivated. Like you need to show, like I love, there's this term, like, if you want talented people to like build you a ship, like don't give them a bunch of wood and hammers and say like, here's a blueprint for a ship, like make them yearn for the open sea. And which I think is like a little heavy handed, but the idea is it's they already yearn for the open sea when they get here. Like, but like, let's show them where we're going. And like, okay, you're you're this role, like, here's how your talent can make this thing happen, can help make this thing happen. And yeah, but like motivating people to do work, like, like for example, like we like seriously actually don't track how much time people spend at work. I don't know when people are around unless they're in a meeting. We have minimum vacation. That is our policy. We have a minimum vacation policy. And it's because like, if there's one thing I'm not worried about with this team, it's about whether they're going to work hard enough. Maybe someday I will lose hold of the culture, but like, my God, that has been like the one of all the things that could go wrong. That has been one of them that I have no fear about, because these are all highly motivated people. And we've done the work of helping them see how hard work for them translates into stuff that they care about, both their personal gain and their impact on the world. And so like, of course they're going to run at it, right? Like people don't like become talented engineers and join tech companies because like the thing that they really want to do is just like goof around and watch sitcoms all day.
Yeah, that's a different kind of corporate culture. Well, that's the antiquated version, which is why they have the no cell phones at your desk policy.
Exactly. And I think that's a great example of them like hanging on to this old way that is now in decline, because what happens is those very policies that they use, the very policies that they have to try to like manage low motivation people, or people who are like not aligned and motivated in the business, because motivation is an intrinsic thing. It's something you develop. But like people like, you have a team of people who aren't motivated. If you believe you're stuck with them, what are the policies you enact? Yeah, no cell phones at your table. You're never going to get a highly motivated person ever with these kinds of policies. And so the thing is, you trap yourself in the very thing that you like hate having by trying to control it, rather than having the courage to say, we got to change everything.
Yeah. You have created the box that people are being told don't be in.
Exactly.
And at that point, when you've closed the door on that box, you've now created somebody who's bitter and is only coming to collect a check. Yep.
And so you like try to clamp down even harder. I mean, like I love like the history of revolutions, as I mentioned, but like, and it's just like, there's so many good examples of like leaders not understanding that change is happening. And so the tighter they clamp down, the more they spell their own doom.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just on, I listened to Masterclass, and there, I can't remember her name, but she talks about leadership, and she talks about the different presidents that she's done studies on. And every one of them is very much, this is what we need to get done. I don't care how we get there, even if it means changing the culture of things, even if it means changing people around me, if it means changing the idea, but the main focus needs to happen. Then they start looking for people that can help make it happen. I think, and I might be misquoting this, but I think FDR used to have Tuesday night cocktails where he would invite a whole bunch of people over to the White House. And for Tuesday night cocktails, you could not talk about anything that was going on in the world. No world issues. We were in the middle of a war. Couldn't talk about it. You could talk about anything else. Talk about your family, talk about your favorite hobbies. You could talk anything. It was just so that he could get a break from all the craziness that he had to deal with. Yeah. Maybe more leaders need to do that, because I think a lot of them have a tendency to forget that they have to have a break too. Do you ever see that?
Totally. And I think one of the reasons that I see that, I've seen it in myself.
Same.
And I think one of the reasons I see that is that, when you do something like run a company, decide to run a company, you start to realize the gravity of it once you start taking on money and employees, and you're like, oh God, I'm telling all these people to like hitch their boats to me, and I'm gonna like take them to the promised land. And so you start to feel this weight of responsibility on your shoulders that is at times overwhelming. And I think one of the mistakes we frequently make is that we take on too much responsibility. Like investors should, investors need to be good investors. Employees need to, but we take on too much at times. The fallacious thinking that I run into, that I see others run into, is that, taking a break is a sign of weakness. Like if I was stronger, if I was tougher, I could just keep working forever. And so we don't want to we don't want to admit weakness, or we don't want to coddle weakness. And so, it's like, well, maybe I can like habituate myself to working harder, because like there have been times in my life where I've been motivated to work harder and not as motivated to work as hard. And that fallacious thinking, I think, makes us resistant to like, okay, I need a break. The way that I finally changed that in myself and my own leadership team was doing a lot of reading about learning, development, growth. And it turns out that it's not that you need a break per se. It's not that you need to relax per se. Like my breaks are all very active. Like some people, are more physically active. Mine are all mentally active. Like I go like craft stuff and
Nice.
or like play complex strategy games or something, right? Like my brain's still very active. The point is, what those breaks do is they allow processes that are in our brain that we don't control consciously to process things, to synthesize, to develop, to marinate. Those breaks make us more creative. Those breaks help us solve problems, right? Like Einstein himself, like what I actually kind of hate, I used to watch like House, the TV show. And one of the things that drove me nuts is he'd be like sitting there staring at a board, throwing his stupid tennis ball until he had the great insight. But there's a reason insights happen in the shower.
Yeah.
They don't happen when you're staring at the board, tearing your hair out. They don't. Right. And it's because like that's just not how the brain operates. Insights happen in background processes that we don't control, that we can only allow to happen when we like let go a little bit of the thing we're trying to solve. And it's when we got that in our company, we started embracing, like I finally convinced the leadership team to put like no mind time. This gets a little zen, but like no mind time in their calendars. We're like, I'm paying you to like walk outside and do nothing, right? I don't just mean don't take meetings, but like grind away on your expense report or whatever. Not that we really do expense reports, but like grind away on this, whatever. I mean, like walk outside and do nothing. Like listen to a book. I don't care. And it's made us more creative for it. So anyway, that's why I think we're bad at taking breaks and why I think we need to.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with that, and it's still one that I have to fight with myself over because it is what it is. We have businesses to run, and sometimes it's a lot of the work is still on my shoulders as far as because the boutique agency that we have, we don't have a lot of employees at all.
Right.
But it's like there's moments in time where I have to get up, get away from the desk, and go out to the patio and just chill out in the sunlight for a minute, get some vitamin D, and come back. And it's sporadic, but it does allow for remembering what I have at my disposal rather than just this. The noggin's good for so much. We have tools now, thanks to guys like you. We have tools that actually work. But there's a lot of new stuff out there on the market that can make life easier for us. And again, it's to encourage the ability for our creativity to be more creative rather than taking a job. And I think that's a lot of what people are missing. It's like they worry about manufacturing jobs are going to go away because robots are going to take it. Well, who's going to maintain the robot? Who's going to think of the new programs for the robots? Who's going to make sure that the parts show up for the robots? Who's going? And I know that's kind of begging the question, but at the same time, it's like it's a progression that's happening. The newer generations will come up and they'll take the place of the old generations. Welcome to humankind. As that happens, better things will happen. Better thoughts will come along. Better inspirations will come along. But if we don't have the culture for it, like you said, it becomes really tough.
Yeah, and that resistance has been every age of history that things have changed. People have been like, oh my God, it's going to be a disaster. Like, imagine if you and I were having this conversation in 1750 and I was like the wacky technostradamus that was like, you know how 95% of people are making food right now? Well, in 200 years, it's going to be 5. And like everyone's first thought would be like, oh my God, 90% of people are just going to like be on the streets starving because what other jobs are there? There's making food. That's what we do. Right. And we can't, the thing is like, we have to accept that we cannot imagine the implications of these changes in the future. Right. And so like people who are predicting doom, what they do is they hold everything about society fixed and they change this one thing. Right. This is why I hate Black Mirror. I think Black Mirror is a garbage show because it takes it's like everything about society and everything about our culture is exactly the same. We change this one thing by a lot. And wouldn't it be bad? It's like, well, yeah, it would.
If you change that one thing only.
Yeah, if you just change that one thing and like there's no such thing as adaptation or like other things changing around it, like of course it would be bad. And so like same with automation, right? Like, oh my God, if we automate away 30% of people's jobs and nothing else changes, it would be bad. Jobless.
It'd be horrible.
Yeah. Of course it would be bad.
Yeah, it would. But thankfully, that's not how things work.
Right.
What would be interesting though, and this is, I'm not sure if this, because it's been a little bit since I've been around them. What would be interesting though, is that if the accelerators and the incubators had a bit of a collective to talk to each other a little more often than they do. And it comes down to, do you guys share what new technologies are coming out so that when you come across somebody that has an idea that you think may not fit, all of a sudden it does?
Well, this may relate to our holding on to something versus like letting it go and embracing something new, because of course, like that's, VCs are in very fierce competition right now. There is more money than there are good startups. And
again, that goes back to they're the money guys. That's cool. They're not the accelerator or incubator. I'm talking about the guys that run those. If they had a collective where they could sit there and go, hey, somebody's coming up with this. What other things could possibly come around that gives them a chance to go and look for other ideas that could supplement the changes that will come with that one.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Hey guys, we're going to take another quick 30-second break. We'll come back. We're going to talk a little bit more about ProdPerfect and a little bit more about what Erik is at. Yeah, thanks. Whatever. Shut up. What also Erik is going to be up to here shortly. Back in 30. And we're back. Last section here, hanging out with Erik Fogg of ProdPerfect. I want to talk a little bit about the company again, just to give people an idea. We did talk about it in the beginning, but what is ProdPerfect? Who's it best for? Who does it serve? And how do people find you?
So ProdPerfect is we're a software company. We're a product company. We build products, right? We're not like a firm or an outsource shop or anything. What our product does is it autonomously builds, maintains, and evolves end-to-end tests for web applications. So normally you'd have a QA team do this. A QA team would think about what tests to build, they'd build them, they'd maintain them, they'd evolve them. These are like Selenium tests, right? Okay. These like big, beefy browser automation tests. Very important, but very clunky traditionally. Very expensive to build and maintain. And nobody, as we talked about with sculpting, nobody likes it, right? Like nobody becomes an engineer to like fix Selenium selectors all day. And
they do, they're weird.
Right, yeah. And we do that. There's like that one guy listening to the show. He's like, hey, I love that.
That's what I live for.
You're taking my job. And so we autonomously do that. So customers plug us in, and the way we do it is we learn how the users use their application. And so we're learning like what the workflows are, what's important to their user. So we're able to produce not just tests, but well prioritized ones, because we know what's important to test and what's like a wacky edge case.
Right.
And what's cool is like nobody else has access to that information. That information also is what allows us to do it autonomously. Nice. And so the folks who buy us, you might normally think they'd be like QA leads, but I actually think, as you could tell from what I said, a big part of the way I think about the world is I think that there are people who are like in positions where they tend to be very attached to old ways of thinking, and letting go seems dangerous. What we learned was that VPs engineering and CTOs, people whose job it is to push the horizon or push the envelope, those are our buyers.
Nice. In
particular, it is folks who understand that a big, bulky end-to-end testing suite is going to get in the way of them deploying fast enough. Got it. You want to deploy 20 times a day, you can't have 500 tests in your end-to-end testing suite. We're able to help you with that by you doing nothing, which is cool. So that's who buys us. If you're like Carta or something, you're building a web application, VP engineering should hit us up. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like a great thing. The mere fact that something like that exists is amazing. So as far as you are concerned, Erik Fogg, the man, what are you up to? I mean, obviously you're on a podcast where, are you speaking anywhere anytime soon on what's going on? I mean, you're at the front edge of machine learning and AI. So any conferences you're talking at or anything? And if not, why? But what other things are you up to? I have like the reverse Woody Allen problem. I currently have the Woody Allen problem. I don't want to talk at any conference that would have me come talk at it. Just because like I'm not cool enough yet. I'm not big enough yet. And I've done it a little bit before. And there are like a lot of people go to, in this like kind of old corporate model, go to conferences in order to like have a way to like waste their time and get paid to do it. And
this is true, unfortunately.
it's super true.
It's
And
very true.
and so like most conferences really bite. And so actually I stay away from conferences right now. I would love to be invited to some of like the really cool ones where it's actually a lot of people getting together who with the intent of like, I'm going to go learn what other people are thinking about for the future so I can be part of it. And so I will go when I go to those conferences. But for now, I keep all of our thought. I'm actually pivoting more and more and more towards thought leadership. I am the chief revenue officer in addition to a few other things. So like I have to worry about sales, but my leaders in sales and media marketing have like developed so much that they're taking over more and more.
Nice.
And putting me in a better position to be able to
Sure.
talk about the future. And like,
Nice.
and there's a whole marketing, of course, there's like a whole marketing strategy involved with like why I'm on podcasts all the time and everything. Not all the time, more often. But I do get the, like, I think I get to, I feel like kind of like the luckiest guy in the world right now. Cause like I was the sales guy, right?
Yeah.
Like early on I was individual selling, and I actually don't like sales all that much. It's just, I was the like least engineering person, and therefore I kind of drew the short straw. Right. Now my job is pivoted more and more to like two things. One, find and inspire, recruit and develop great team.
Yep.
Inspire, recruit and develop great customers. And so I spend a lot of time on that inspiring, and it means I can spend a lot of time thinking. I get to spend a lot of time having like very cool conversations, like help people challenge around thinking, again, whether they're my team or customers. And I get to spend a lot of time trying to proselytize, right? I'm a bit of an evangelist in my role, trying to proselytize that the future is going to be different. And I think like one of the things you and I talked about was trajectory early on. Yep. And I didn't say this, but I am absolutely convinced this is true. In 5 years, nobody will hire a QA engineer again.
Very possible.
It just won't happen.
Very possible.
And like everyone will by then will be using ProdPerfect or a ProdPerfect competitor should it ever arise. And like the question everyone who like encounters us needs to ask is, do I do that now or do I do it later? Like the idea that you're going to like want people to manually do this it will be as silly as wanting, like, there are some people who need on-prem, but for most folks, it would be as silly as saying like, oh, I'm going to hire my IT team to manage my server farm. Like, of course you're not. You're going to buy AWS or Azure or whatever, right? Yep. Again, with some exceptions.
Yep.
And so what's cool is I know this is the future. I'm trying to help some other people figure out as that, like, when the time to change is right, to like let go of the old and jump over to the new. What's the right time for you? That's my job.
That's cool. Awesome. That's an awesome job. Sounds like you got more than just chief rev. Sounds like chief inspiration, chief evangelical, all that stuff.
I'm like one of those like tin pot dictators where I have like all sorts of unearned medals all over my chest.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody knows what they're for, but they're there.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the best. Cool. So people can find you on the normal places, LinkedIn, ProdPerfect, I would assume, has a company page on LinkedIn as well.
So yeah, I think the best places to look, if you're like, oh, this product seems cool, right? Go to prodperfect.com. Like, the page is designed to send you to the right place to figure out how to buy the thing. Right? Okay, cool. But if you want to hear more about what I think, or like even better, if you want to argue with me, which I love, our blog is cool. So prodperfect.com/blog. Everything I write ends up on there at some point. And LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, the way to do it is linkedin.com/in/Erik Fogg, ERIKFOGG. I post like controversial opinions on there all the time because I like, because like being provocative turns out it's good for marketing. But everything I post, I actually believe. So people like getting in arguments with me. It's a lot of fun. So I welcome, if you listen to this podcast, you're like, wow, this guy's an idiot. And he's like, good thing he's not in charge of anything because he'd kill us all. Come tell me.
Now that, my friends, is an invitation. It's not often you get a guy who will stand up in front of a crowd, pull out a small to medium sized sheath sword, and go, "Who wants to fight?"
Yeah, totally.
It's kind of rare.
I learned the most from people who disagree with me, right? Everyone's like, wow, you're right, Erik. Like, it's dangerous to surround oneself with them. I actually want, like Lincoln's team of rivals thing, right? Like, I want people calling me on my BS.
Yeah, but and that's just it too, is we don't know what we don't know until we talk to somebody who knows otherwise, and hopefully both sides learn. And again, this comes back to the conservative versus liberal thing.
Indeed. I would not be practicing anything of what I preached if I did not invite people to tell me I'm an idiot.
Yeah, well, and got it. Cool. Want to thank you very much, Erik, for coming and spending some time with me. My coffee's done, so I have to go get another cup. I'm sure yours is about over. So, yep, there we go. And yours is in a mason jar, even better. I love it.
I know. I'm such a Silicon Valley.
No, dude, it's all good, bro. Anyway, no, guys, again,
man.
Namaste. Everybody, just so you remember, all the links are down below, where you can find Erik, where you can find ProdPerfect. Make sure you follow them. Make sure you engage with them on the blog, engage with Erik on his profile. You had the invitation of argument. If you wish, go for it. If you're watching us on YouTube, that way, there's a subscribe button, and I keep forgetting a mirror. And then there's a little button that has a bell on it. Make sure you hit that too. That way, when we get another awesome guest like Erik coming on Java Chat, hanging out. If you're listening to us on any of the podcast platforms, download, subscribe, check it out. Save it as a favorite. If you're listening to us on Anchor, we do have listener support enabled. We'd love some support. We could use it. At the same time, that's really not my biggest one. My biggest one is you guys took the time to listen to this. You had to have gotten something out of it. You probably know 2 or 3 people that can also get a lot out of it. Send them the link. Let them hear it too. Let them watch it too. This is done for you guys to be able to find inspiration, find information, learn from the other people that are out there actually doing it. Make use of it. Share it with your friends and your colleagues.
Especially if they'll disagree.
Oh, yes, all day. You'll be disagreeing with Erik, not me, because that's the... And if you have questions, make sure you post them down in the comments below. Erik will have the link so he can come back and check.
I'll actually come back and take a look. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. By all means, thank you for making the time and taking the time to come and watch and listen. Make sure you take care of each other and stay up, stay safe, stay healthy, and live. For myself, Coffee with Mike and Erik Fogg. Ciao for now.
Be awesome to each other and party on, dudes. Oh, it's excellent. I blew it. All right. See ya, everyone.
For more information on Java Chat, visit www.javachatpodcast.com. You've been listening to Coffee with Mike on Java Chat. Tune in weekly to this podcast for the next episode. You can also download or subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. A production of Oasis Media Group, LLC. Located in Las Vegas, Nevada. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved.